Hi there, it's me, Teacher Mike from PhuketPals.org. I hope you're all okay today. Now what we're going to talk about is IELTS reading today. Now the IELTS reading component is something that many students come to me with difficulty. In Thailand, where we're based, students often struggle with the reading component and the writing component. And this is actually very different from where I used to work many years ago in China. In China, it was the other way around. Students actually struggled with the speaking and the listening components, but here we are, everyone's different. Students often ask, what's the best way to improve IELTS reading? And it's a pretty difficult question to answer. And if you ask one teacher, no two teachers will give you the same answer on that. But we've been teaching IELTS here in Phuket with Phuket Pals for over 10 years. I personally have been teaching IELTS for, my goodness, must be over 15 years, 15, 16, 17 years. So I've kind of seen everything there is to see with regard to IELTS reading. And I've come up with a few things that you shouldn't really focus too much on, and then a few things that you should focus on to raise that score up to what you need for university or a new career or whatever it is you need the IELTS test for. Now, if you type in IELTS reading techniques or something, IELTS reading tips and things like this, if you type in all the YouTube and the world of blogs is just awash. It's completely full of these so-called techniques to pass IELTS. Let's call them magical techniques, okay? Some of them are quite simple, some of them are very elaborate. You have reverse reading techniques, there's just the list goes on and on and on and on. And often students who are pressed for time or perhaps aren't quite at the right level yet, they often look for a shortcut. It's human nature to do this. And very often they're filled with a sense of false confidence, you could say, that with this technique they will be able to raise their score by 1 band or whatever. This just doesn't happen, and I'd welcome anyone to challenge me on that. It just doesn't work. Same with tips and tricks. This is a particular phrase of annoyance for me. Actually, it seems to have, tips and tricks seems to have, this word seems to have, it's kind of just exploded into the popular lexicon in the last couple of years. And a lot of this stuff, like tips and techniques, top 5 tips and techniques, top 5, top 10, whatever. A lot of this type of wording, it has been built around search engine optimization. So people are, content producers are feeding people with these little bite-sized, usually quite meaningless ideas of how to raise their score. Some of them are useful, don't get me wrong, but this idea of tips and tricks, I don't know. I still haven't seen any tips and tricks for IELTS that I find useful. So again, if you're an IELTS student and you're struggling with the test, don't fall down the hole, or into the trap, I should say, of focusing on tips and tricks and building up a notebook full of what's the tip and trick for answering true, false, not given, or what's the tip or trick for this, that. Most of it is just common sense, and people are kind of playing with words quite a lot just to get views on YouTube or get hits on their blog or sell things. So just be aware of that. There are no shortcuts for IELTS reading or IELTS in general. The third thing I've seen over the years is some students just concentrating on reading novels and, reading novels and thinking they're going to improve their IELTS reading score. Of course, reading novels is an incredibly beneficial pursuit or hobby to have, but it has limited value in terms of preparing for the IELTS reading test. So, not that I say don't read novels, because people should be reading a part of a novel, or be it fiction or non-fiction, on a daily basis, because the benefits are obvious. You're going to improve your word power, You're going to improve your reading speed. You're going to improve your general ability to think and reason. You're going to improve your sentence structure, your spelling, your punctuation, and the list goes on and on. So I'm not saying do not read novels while preparing for the IELTS reading test. What I'm saying is don't focus solely on reading novels and think you will then go into the test and get a 9, okay? Because you probably won't. So this is what I think students should do. Instead of focusing on techniques, tips and tricks, and solely reading novels, just let me go back a moment. Like with the technique aspect, there are certain, you should develop your own IELTS reading test taking strategies or ways to approach each particular question. And with my students, I never say this is the golden rule. I never say this is the way to answer a particular question. One that comes up again and again are true, false, not given questions, okay? Because these are arguably the most difficult questions on the IELTS reading test. And students will often ask you for, what is the technique to answer these questions? Now, I can tell them how I answer these questions and what I find to be the most efficient use of time, etc., to answer true, false, not given questions. But it doesn't work for everyone. Everyone approaches things in a different way. So what you need to do is you need to practice with practice tests and figure out what works for you. It's more of a solo journey, to be honest. Until you figure out how you want to approach this, what works best for you, and how you can most efficiently use your time in the test itself. So what we do here at Phuket Pals, and what I've done with my students for donkey's years, is we'll give, at the very beginning of a course, if it's a private course, or if it's a small group course, for example, or a Skype course online, we'll give students, say, maybe between three, it depends, usually 3 or 4 past papers or practice papers from the Cambridge books, from the Cambridge series. I'm sure those of you who have prepared for IELTS before are well aware of the Cambridge series, 1 to 9 or 1 to 10 or whatever it is now, of the test books. Okay, you can buy these in decent bookshops. In each book there are 4 official practice papers from an official source, from the Cambridge source, and these are exactly the same standard and layout and everything else as you would get in the real IELTS test. And I highly, highly recommend that you get your hands on a set of these books, okay? Because the internet is completely full, again, of questions that aren't official questions. And some of them are okay, some of them are a bit kind of waste your time, to say the least. So you really need the past paper questions for IELTS reading, as then you know what you're up against and what you have to do, okay? So once you have your 3 or 4 past papers as a student, you need to set your timer on your clock for 1 hour, because you only have 1 hour for each reading, 1 hour for the full reading test. Do all 3 sections of the reading test in 1 hour, just like you would in the real test. And then once you've done that, what you need to do is do exactly the same for the other tests as well. So you have 3 or 4 full IELTS reading papers completed, okay? Then what we advise next is to sit down with a tutor or an IELTS expert. If you don't have the money to do that, that's fine, you can try and do it yourself. But what you do with your tutor is you talk about the problems you had, the areas you found that were easier for you, and then you sit down and go through the answers with your tutor or on your own. And you look for patterns in your answers. So look for questions that you're getting right all the time. Question types, that you're getting right all the time. Look for question types that you're getting wrong all the time over those 3 or 4 papers. And once you do that, make a little table. Sometimes we do it as like a tally chart, like 5, 5, like this. So you can count how many different question types that are giving you problems. So chances are true, false, not given will be the one that you're getting wrong the most, or it could be diagram completion, or it could be paragraph headings, or it doesn't matter. Just check your little tally list on a piece of paper and find out which of those different question types for IELTS reading are giving you the most problems. Once you've done that, okay, then you're in a much better position to ascertain where you need to focus your attention on for the rest of your course, if you're with a tutor, or for your home tuition, if that's the case. A recent student I had, their problem areas were in true, false, not given, and paragraph headings. Yes, true, false, not given, and paragraph headings. And most of the other areas of the IELTS reading test, they were okay. There was no issue there. So what we did, or what I designed then for that student for the rest of their course, were just each lesson we would focus on, we kind of zero in, kind of microscope. Imagine just zooming in through a microscope into those two problem areas of paragraph completion and of the true, false, not given, and then just hammering the student with those types of questions at home, in class, having time practice, also showing them how I would do that question, and then putting them under a bit of pressure with time and seeing how they answer that question. If my way of doing that helped them, not saying it's the only way to do it, and then give them a chance to develop their own technique if that's the case as well.